Good morning. It is cold, it is raining out there, and I know many people are really finding it very hard to get to places of work. But I think for someone who has been in Uganda for some time, rainfall at this particular time should not be an excuse. Why am I saying so? Don't get me wrong, because we know that we have two rainy seasons. We have the March to May and August to December. So we know that it's going to rain. Our meteorological department has already told us that we are going to be having rains. So it's all about you. Either you wake up early so that you beat the jam that comes with the rain. You prepare yourself so that you're able to maneuver throughout the rain. However, we are saying where visibility is next to impossible, please don't move. If you're a pedestrian, and you're moving on foot, that's what I mean. We have a number of manholes. Be very careful. If you can't determine the depth of that water, do not tamper to drive your way through. So make sure your wipers are working very well, your lights are very good, so that you do not hit or end up moving into some other lane. So let's just have these tips that make it proper for us to arrive at our various destinations on time. Once again, I'm Robert Chirabo. Welcome to Good Morning Uganda Extra, which is an extension of Good Morning Uganda. Now we are always here from 6:30 to kickstart your morning. You can't afford to miss. Make it a date with us next day, which is tomorrow, so that you start early as 6. Because we are here to brighten up, to spice up, to give you the relevant information that you need to know as you go about business. Now, I have a guest in studios with me. And we are going to be handling something very, very important, and that is a call for a Uganda food policy. Now, we all know food is very important because no one can live without food. I think I last heard of Jesus Christ who fasted for 40 days. But we've seen many make that attempt and they have died. They have not been able to make it. Now, food is very important. But also, we need to regulate. We need to have policies that will see how best do we have a food that is safe and how do we ensure sustainability. Now, this morning I have Million Belai, who happens to be the General Coordinator, Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa. And I'm also going to be joined by I'm joined also by another guest, and we are also going to be discussing issues of food security, and that is Joshua Ajiku, Head of Program, Pelem, Uganda. Now, allow me greet my guests, and of course, I have had that introduction, including Joshua, who has just joined us, but better late than never. I'll begin with Million Belly, who was with me right from a lovely morning to you, and welcome to our studios.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you.
And also, Joshua, you're most welcome.
Thank you very much. Good morning, viewers.
And to begin with, when you talk about a call for Uganda food policy, I want to begin with Joshua. Joshua, when you talk about a food policy, we've had so much surrounding food. We have food security, food systems, food this. Now, what are we referring to for a national food policy for a country like Uganda?
Thank you very much. First off, of course, food is very important for us. And Ugandans, we are called gifted by nature for among many things, but food is one of them because we have a huge diversity. But you know, right now we are faced with a number of challenges that are affecting our food system, issues to do with climate change, land degradation. All these are affecting productivity and in a way affecting issues of food security. So a food policy would give us the framework, a guiding framework on how to tackle issues of our food, our nutrition, but most importantly, our sovereignty, food sovereignty. So that is why we are really rallying towards with government to see that we have a national food policy. Thank you.
Now, a quick one. You brought in sovereignty when it comes to food.
Yeah.
Now, what is that again?
Well, sovereignty goes beyond security. I'll give you a good example. The Russia-Ukraine war and what happened. You could see that because of the disruptions very far off, many of the African countries were affected. They could not feed themselves because apparently they had most of the production system is dependent on synthetics, fertilizers, which are mostly coming from Russia and Ukraine. Most of these of the countries are dependent on wheat products, most of which, of course, as Uganda, we are net importers of all these products. So in a way, in a system like that, where you don't have control over the factors of production, over the entire system of food system, then your sovereignty is compromised. And when your sovereignty is compromised as a country, then your security and all other factors are compromised. So food sovereignty goes beyond food security. It looks at the different factors of production, the rights to make decisions, especially by the ones who are mostly concerned in food production, especially like the smallholder farmers, and yeah, to ensure that your security is guaranteed in the longer term. Thank you.
Then this brings me to ask, when talk about food security, because it is this that we want to have as a background for us to have a national food policy. What is food security?
Well, food security as a concept, it actually means about the availability of food. And food can be available, but it has to be economically and physically accessible. So it's about accessibility of food. Food can be available, accessible, but it has to be also nutritious and healthy. And it has to be there every time. So stability is very much important, but currently two other concepts are added, which are agency. Agency means the power or the capacity of local communities to control their food, and sustainability, the production of food in a sustainable way. In that way, by the addition of these two concepts, it has come nearer to the concept of food sovereignty. Yeah. But we do have also another concept, which is right to food.
Yes.
The right to food actually implies that governments have a responsibility to make sure that there is food for people. So it divides the people, the right holders, and those who have the power, the government, those who are responsible to make sure that food is available to the right holders. So that's where the food security, the right to food, and food sovereignty stand.
Now this brings me to government's commitment, Joshua, when you talk about food security. Of course, he brought in a few elements there, the right to food. Of course, anyone would assume that is something we would be discussing, even everyone, because to live you must feed.
Yeah.
You know, but these elements also coming out. That's why it brings in government's commitment towards such.
Yes, of course, primarily, and as per the Constitution of Uganda, 1995, it is, I think it's Article 23. The government commits itself to ensure that they set conditions that are adequate, that enable farmers, that enable all Ugandans to have adequate food, ensure that there is food security, such that there is you know, a well-balanced life, such that we are able to continue to thrive as a nation where our food is guaranteed. So it is that commitment in the Constitution which now underpins the mandate of the government to ensure adequate food. And you see that in 2003, there was a national food and nutrition policy, which was, of course, now it has been overtaken by time. But it already shows that there is commitment by government. And also there are other supportive policies, the National Agriculture Policy, and different frameworks. So of course already signatories, the food systems, conventions and all that. So what is very important is that as a government and as the stakeholders who work very closely with the government, it becomes very central that we work together to ensure that the population have the capacity to ensure that, one, to produce, but also to purchase and to adequately consume in the changing context. And I've already told you the context. One of them is climate change. With the changing climate, the production systems have to adjust accordingly. We are having a lot of biodiversity loss, which is affecting our food production. You find that most of us, the food we grew up on is continuously being lost. And this really brings a challenge, because this is where the issue of sovereignty comes in. Because for as long as we are not able to control the factors of production, if the farmers have to depend on external factors, for example, on seed, to depend on other sources to get seed for production, have to get other external sources which they don't have control over. Sometimes they don't have the purchasing power. This is a good example. Farmers are now battling with, should we prioritize school fees or should we purchase seed and fertilizers and so on? So we need to build a system. We need to provide a condition as a government where the factors of production that are very key, the inputs, are available to the farmers. They are ecologically sound, that they do not harm the environment, because that is what is going to be the foundation for production, especially the sustainability of production. We are going to look at the market systems. How is this food being able to reach the person who needs it? And is the system fair for all? Is the producer who is going to do the most, and all the other value chain actors, are they equitably benefiting from this system? Because all these factors, once they are not working well, then you have a bit of a problem. You would have a disruption, and that is why government has that commitment to ensure that the conditions, there is an enabling policy environment to guide all these actors who are playing, but especially the smallholder farmers, who are the majority producers and the majority of the population in Uganda.
Now, you've talked about ensuring this, but we also have to look at collaboration of partnerships.
Yeah.
Because it's different for you to have a very good policy in place. Government already has a role, like we said, have the agricultural policy and a number of laws there. But how do we promote this collaboration and partnership? How do we do that better? Million.
I think when we talk about collaboration, there are different levels of collaboration. By the way, the organization that I'm leading, the Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa, as its name implies, is an alliance. Yes. It's an alliance of farmers networks. It's an alliance of fisher folk networks, pastoralist networks, indigenous peoples networks, and networks of women, youth, faith-based institutions. So it's an alliance. It's a big alliance, working in 50 of the 55 African countries, and also, over 200 million constituencies. It's a big alliance. It's the biggest collaboration, and this collaboration is a very important collaboration because we have to move the base. We have to move farmers, fisher folks, pastoralists to really make sure that the food is produced in enough amount and in a sustainable and resilient way. So it's that one level of an alliance. The next level of an alliance is an alliance that we are making with the government inside our countries, and also at the regional level. So through our networks in Uganda, for example, Pelam Uganda, ISAF Uganda, and other range of organizations, we are working with the Ugandan government. On the climate negotiation, for example, we are working with the Ugandan government to really work together for a better policy for Africa and for Uganda. And this alliance extends also an alliance with the African Union, an alliance with the Pan-African Parliament. So we have started working with the Pan-African Parliament. As Joshua explained, the local movement is working on Uganda food policy. And also we are working together for an Africa level food policy. So I think the cooperativeness and the working together comes here. What is our role in this alliance? Our role is we bring the story from the ground, you know. So far when the policy is made, it's basically made by outside actors. Yeah. Most of the time, at the African Union level, even in our countries, outside actors finance and the outside consultants come, they draft our policies, and that's what's happening. But what we are saying now is we have the capacity to propose a policy. And that policy is based also on a range of negotiations and dialogues among food actors at the local level. So there was an alliance on this food policy agenda with researchers at the country level, university, lecturers, and the government, even some entrepreneurs, and the bigger civil society. So this cooperation, this alliance is the basis of our working relationship, and that's how we are trying to defeat the Green Revolution or the industrial agricultural revolution kind of narratives. And I will explain the narratives the time comes. Yeah.
Well, now this brings me to Joshua again. How do we have food security as a national priority? Because currently what we know for Uganda is, yes, food is a right, but it is up to you. Unless there is a disaster that has stricken, where they have to bring food, or when COVID-19, but it's more of a personal responsibility. Government is not responsible on how you feed or what you feed on. So how do we make this food security as a national priority?
Thank you very much. I think that's a very, very good question. And I think what needs to be made clear to us as Ugandans is that a right to food does not mean a right to be fed. So the right to food and food security perspective is looking at the role of the government is to ensure that there is an enabling environment to facilitate the production of adequate, safe, and nutritious food. To ensure that all the actors have what it takes to produce this food and make it available in an affordable way. And which now asks us to question, for example, the first thing would be, how much are we investing in agriculture, for example, as a country? We know that agriculture is a food basket for the region. We know that agriculture is one of those sectors that is believed to stimulate the socio-economic development of the country, since majority are farmers. But how much are we investing in terms of agricultural infrastructure, in terms of showing that we have biodiversity conservation, sustainability of production practices, and all these. So this is what now where the government comes in. How do we ensure that the farmers already, for example, we have an extension policy that is being reviewed and strategy, but how do we ensure that, for example, we have enough extension workers that are tooled and retooled within the new ways of production that are ecologically and economically viable? How then do we ensure that, for example, the different actors, the taxation and all these are conducive for the production systems? You know, how do we incentivize, for example, agroecological practices that are able not only to guarantee our production, but also regenerate what we have lost in terms of our biodiversity and so on? Because once these factors are in place, then we don't need to feed people. People can be able to feed themselves. And that is what we are trying to work around. So the facilities are there. The ministry is working very hard. And as Pelham Uganda, we are working very closely with the Ministry of Agriculture in many ways. We are developing the National Agroecology Strategy right now. And this is going to be a framework that is going to guide aspects around the right to food. Because agroecology goes beyond production. It looks at all these social, ecological, and economic factors that underpin the sustainability of production. So once we have this strategy in place, and once we have the resources and the different stakeholders to work together in terms of its implementation, and also ensure that agroecological principles are integrated in the different policies and strategies, like Dr. Million has said. We ensured, for example, that agroecology is included in our climate our climate policy, ensure that it's integrated in our submissions and commitments, nationally determined contributions that we submitted to the convention, UNFCCC, ensuring that all these things, that ecological, social, and economic factors are integrated at the core of production and the food system. Then we can be sure that we have food security. Thank you.
Talking about food security, a call for Uganda to have a food policy is what we are discussing this morning. And of course, for us here in Uganda, Dr. Million, once it rains, it means simply get your hoe, run to the garden.
Yeah.
And we depend on rainfall-fed agriculture. So at such a time, people, because very few depend on irrigation or can actually afford irrigation. Most of our farmers who are anyway peasant farmers, very few in commercial agriculture, they don't have capacity to access, to afford some of these irrigation tools. So now it is time for the garden. If you go to visit anyone and they are in there, well, you've come at a time when our last season of the year is on, that is rainfall-fed agriculture, describing that. Allow me to go for a short break. I'll be returning and we'll still be discussing issues of food, food security, food insecurity, and a call for a national food policy for Uganda.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala, this is Good Morning Uganda Extra.
UBC is the national public broadcaster. We educate, inform, entertain, and inspire our audiences. You can watch us on free-to-air channel 001. DSTV channel 282, GoTV channel 371, Star Times channel 201, Zuku TV channel 20, and Azam TV channel 350. Even when your subscription expires, you can still watch UBC for free on your pay TV platforms.
A new dawn on Behind the Headlines with me, Timothy Nyangweso. Every Wednesday, live in our studios in the heart of Kampala, we have conversations that have analysis, explanation, but not every truth is fact, and not every fact is truth. Every Wednesday, 10 p.m. on your public broadcaster.
All on your public broadcaster, UBC, inspiring Uganda.
Nkwanga Ramazan is my name, the head teacher of this great school, Ikumbia Seed Secondary School. The school has the staff room well furnished, administration well furnished, the computer lab well furnished, the library wonderful, the multipurpose hall well furnished. The teachers are also enjoying in the staff quarters. The school has teachers totaling to 28. Ikumbia Seed has embraced the new curriculum. I want to thank the government for that bright idea. There are many students that end up in senior 4 with no document. But with the coming of the IT, the skilled children are going to have certificates in skills as early as senior 3. And that certificate is equivalent to a senior 4 certificate. Ikumbia Seed Secondary School is a very great school that has influenced the lives of people or changed the lives of people of Ikumbia sub-county. I want to thank the parents and the government for this kind of input.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala. This is Good Morning Uganda Extra.
Welcome back from that show. Thank you so much for being with us on UBC TV. It is Good Morning Uganda Extra. I'm Robert Chirabo Nyonyitono, and I have people who have specialized on issues regarding food. And we are standing, or they are standing, I'm saying we are, because this is a global desire to have food policies for various countries. And that's why I have Milton and Dr. Million. Doctor, after this break, Africa is a blessed continent, I want to say. Africa, we have fertile soils. Yes, we have semi-arid and all that. But yeah, Africa, we have fertile soils. Africa, when it comes to food, one would say we are not lacking. There is so much to eat in Africa. Compared to some continents where you find that maybe people can only depend on spaghetti. You know, Africa have varieties. Go to any country in Africa, leave Uganda, go to Zambia, go to Kenya, you'll find various foods that they eat, and maybe those that even unify us. But let's look at those fundamental problems when it comes to Africa food systems, because you can't be so blessed, but then over a time, you have food insecurity. When we talk about where there is food, you have issues regarding food safety, because it's not all about having food, but how safe is the food that you're eating. Why do we find these challenges in Africa?
I think you need to go back to understand the present. You need to go past to understand the present. The past, unfortunately, I have to go as far back as the slave trade, and address also issues related to colonialism. Did Africa have a food system, a governance system, an economic system before slavery? The question is yes. Slavery hugely disrupted African agriculture, and later on Africans became a slave in their own countries through colonialism. So what the major shift that has come is one number of, close to now 12 million Africans were taken out of Africa to farm in other continents, in the Caribbean, in the American. That took the working force. And after that, in much more detrimentally, it introduced the concept of producing food outside. Reorienting agriculture to market-based, to export. So that export idea was extended also to colonialism.
We went to raw materials that we even don't eat.
Yes.
Tobacco, cotton.
Yes, I was reading now when I was coming here, an article that I shared with some of my friends about Uganda. Uganda had its own land use system in relation to food system. But during colonialism, they introduced a new form of land ownership in Uganda. I think it's about 9,300 square miles of the land was allocated under crown leadership, and the rest was given to the others, and that has disrupted hugely the local food system, the local landholding system. It still now persists, you see. It's still now, a range of experts who are coming from outside advise you to produce for the market, to send it to the outside and get your GDP higher. That reorientation has basically destabilized our agricultural system. Now, this is in the form of the Green Revolution agenda, which tells you that if you don't invite business, if you don't change your laws and regulations and the biosafety laws to suit business, and also if you don't change your seeds to high yielding variety or to genetically modified organisms or to genetically edited crops, if you don't use agrochemicals, By the way, I just want to use this opportunity, the horror that I feel when I go to some Ugandan farms. People are using Roundup, to kill herbicides. Roundup is a carcinogen agent. It has a lot of bad health consequences for the people of Uganda. It's proven. Even the World Health Organization has even said it can cause cancer. So I really want to warn
Roundup?
Ugandans. Roundup.
Common on
Glyphosate.
almost every farm.
Glyphosate. Yes, it's a
glyphosate.
very, very, very dangerous. I cannot even emphasize how dangerous that chemical is. So that's what, these are the sort of things that come into our food system. We are told that, without agrochemicals, we cannot produce food. Land in the hands of the Africans is not productive, so you have to invite others to farm for you. This kind of. And you have to reorient your agriculture to market so that, you get money to buy food instead of you producing your own food. So this kind of reorientation has really destabilized the African food system. As you know, all of our governments are wallowing in debt. The debt issue is very, very, very bad. Our governments have agreed to allocate 10% of the GDP to agriculture. They couldn't do it to a larger extent because we are wallowing in debt. How did we go into this debt is a very important question. So we are trapped into a food system, and on that add climate crisis. The climate crisis is a huge crisis that's coming on us, and even they are handling, or they are controlling the climate agenda even. You see, that's a problem, and we have seen what happened during the African Climate Week in Kenya. The major documents and the main documents prepared by an outside company. So it's a lot of interference from outside on our agriculture, and our unquestioning absorption of other people's agenda, other people's idea, instead of the idea of our own people. Ugandans have been farming for hundreds of years, and they have a lot of experience. Where does this diversity in Ugandan food system came from? From people. So who are we listening? Are we listening to the people or ideas from coming outside? Which is kind of, organized to convince us so that we become their agents of economic development for themselves. So that is the main problem of African food system, and we can't understand African food system without wearing a political economy or a political ecology lens. It's not a question of technology alone, efficiency alone. When they tell you that if you improve technology, you'll be fine. If you are efficient, you'll be fine. But there is a fundamental problem, and that fundamental problem is related to our mentality. We have to decolonize our mind and really, really understand the issues.
Now, this takes me, Doctor has given a very good background and even really mentioned why we do have this challenge in Africa. And I love so much that he has talked about the exportation we cherish so much. And I see our farmers, what is selling? What is selling? You see, now there is market for this in this country. There is market for hash avocado. Everyone, they are cutting down banana plantations. It's now hash avocado. Everyone is into that. Tomorrow it is this. And some of these things, they can't consume them. Now, if you have 3 acres of hash avocado, you need to sell the hash avocado so that you can buy rice, you can buy posho, you can to eat. That is something very, very disturbing. Now, let's look at the smallholder farmers, Joshua here, which we know that most of African countries, these have a great role to play in the struggle for our national food policy and food security. How do we empower them? What is their role? How best can we help them?
Thank you very much. Well, like you've said it, I think I would say 9 out of every 10 Ugandans is from a farming background. I even think 9 is understatement. We all have a farming background, one or another. And most of us, even in our corporate jobs, you find you have a farm somewhere. So Uganda is an agricultural country. Majority of our land holdings is between 3, I would say it is 5 acres and less. So that makes us primarily smallholder farmers. So the big question here is, for example, how do we then work towards our ambitions, given the context that majority of these farms are smallholder in nature? And a good example here is, for example, the agro industrialization program. Very important. This is a program that government is looking at in terms of transformation, rural socio-economic transformation. But then now the question is, how do we agro-industrialize in the context where majority of our farmers are smallholder farmers? It means we cannot do it business as usual, you know. And also, this is a time to question some of these, like Dr. Miona said, the industrial models. I will not mention the specific regions, but we know regions in the country where commercial agriculture has taken place. Large-scale plantation agriculture has taken place. But some of these regions are the poorest. If you look at the poverty index in Uganda, one of them is Eastern Uganda, for example. You wouldn't say the disruption is because of anything. It's had very good social, political stability for a long time. Very many plantations of sugarcane and so many things. But the poverty, the food insecurity is a big problem. So how do we then agro-industrialize in the context where, one, food security won't be compromised. Number two, we're going to realize social, and I emphasize the aspect of social because it is very important. We want agriculture that is socially responsive, that respects people's culture and the food. Like you said, if you're in Buganda here, people want to eat luwombo, want to eat, matoke. If you don't give matoke to, if you don't serve matoke in Buganda here, you've not given people food, you know. So agriculture that transforms us to a state where we cannot, we can't eat that which we need, what we desire and we call food, becomes a problem. So helping farmers, one is social organization. I think the most important thing for transitioning agriculture system is how do we once again build the social organization of the farmers movement. We had very thriving cooperative movements, for example. These are no longer functional, you know.
Bugishu is crippling.
It's crippling, and I think it's among the ones that have been struggling, that have been remaining. So how do we strengthen the social organization? Then how do we avail, how do we make available favorable financing for the smallholder farmers? We know that most of these, I'll give an example, a very good initiative, agriculture credit facility. Can we do an evaluation and see how many of the smallholder farmers have actually benefited from the agriculture credit facility? How do we, and these are the majority, so how then are we going to transform our population when the facility is available, cannot be afforded by the majority? Look at the agriculture insurance scheme, very good initiative. But how many of the smallholder farmers, first of all, are aware of this program, but also can access it? And also we've had incidences where smallholder farmers have come to us and told us where they've been able to sign up and they've been not been compensated where they've gotten loss because of the way in which the terms, this weather-based index insurance becomes a bit complicated. And so these schemes sometimes use it to their advantage and to the ignorance of the farmers. Let's look at the market systems. How much is the farmer selling their produce vis-a-vis how much you're buying it when you're going to eat it somewhere in the supermarket or in our local markets? So how then do we work, for example, on promoting territorial markets, empowering them? These are already existing, but how do we strengthen them in a way that they can be able to extend value to the producer? How do we concentrate value in a small, in that locality? Because you see, when we have localized and short value chains, then it means that the opportunities that come with these value chains create more opportunities, for example, for the youth. We'll be able to address youth unemployment. If we can be able to, for example, process the foods within the locality, be able to have all these kinds of facilities that can empower and increase our purchasing power locally, then it means that we'll see farmers benefiting more and we'll see socioeconomic development. So then finally the issue of, I've already talked about the inputs. How do we ensure that the smallholder farmers are in control of the key factors of production? The first one is seed. And that is why as Pelham Uganda, as the Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa, we promote farmer-managed seed systems. Farmer-managed seed systems is really working towards building the capacity of the farmers to be able to produce and to manage the seed that is of good quality, that is available, that is resilient because it has been adapted to these conditions. So that way, just like you said, when it rains, you have the seed. But right now, for example, farmers are looking for school fees. At the same time, they have to buy seed. What do you prioritize? All these are key factors. But once they have good quality seed, and we're talking about farmers going to the open market and just buying any grain and quality seed. No, there are initiatives, there are seed banks, we do participatory plant breeding, we do all these variety selections and seed enhancements to ensure that the quality of the seed can be able to increase production and productivity, but also the resilience of the farming system. Thank you very much.
Well, now when you talk about the issue of seed, it reminds me those what we want to call sometimes the good days, where someone would grow maize, then pick a few, dry, keep it somewhere. The next planting season, they simply go and pick. Today, you attempt it, you'll see how hard it is. You have to go to some store there where they sell seeds, then you buy the seed itself. You know, it is really hard, and when you look at farmers managing their seed, it's very important. Well, in the interest of time, Doctor, your organization, the Alliance, why are you advocating for a continental food policy?
Yeah, a continental food policy is needed for various reasons. One thing, we need to control our own food system as Africans. And that policy idea has to come from the people. But much more importantly, we need to have a vision of the kind of food that we want. Everybody wants, healthy and nutritious food, produced without harming the environment, and a food which is culturally appropriate, and ensuring the justice in the food system. That's very much important, as much as we want to produce more food. So currently, we did a study. We looked at food-related policies in Africa. The majority of them lack some important things. One is there is incoherence and then a policy incoherence. One policy says one thing and the other policy says quite the opposite of the other. Just to give you an example, an agricultural policy talks about modernization, increasing the use of chemicals, and the green revolution kind of agenda. An environment policy says we need to reduce the amount of the footprint, the greenhouse gas that we produce. So how do we marry the two? That's very much important. So we have looked across all the policies and there is incoherence. Policy incoherence is very much important. In terms of vision, there is nothing about the right to food, food sovereignty, the sustainability of the food system and addressing health issues. These are all not included in most of our policies. And also we need to mobilize the base, the people around the kind of food that we need, and we need to counter increasing pressure from the outside, which is trying to shackle us, under the narrative. They say that it is very good, but it is not very good. So we need a coherent, a very, very good food system for Africa. That's why we are proposing an African food policy, and we are working with the African Union in the Pan-African Parliament, and also with a number of countries on this agenda.
Well, thank you so much, Doctor. And before we move out of here, Joshua's there. Oh, you're parting short. And I'm really told you're so much interested in small farmer holders here. What is your final message to them?
Yes, thank you very much. The final message for me and on behalf of the civil society actors that we work with is to see that we promote agroecology as a counter-narrative to the conventional industrial system. And by agroecology, I mean the application of social and ecological principles in designing and managing food and agriculture systems. So that way, we are able, just like Doctor has said, we are able to advance a food system, a food and agriculture system that is not only productive and socially sound, but it is also ecologically sound. so we don't deplete our natural resource base any further. We cannot afford that. So agroecology is key, and smallholder farmers have to be at the center of food system and agriculture transformation. Thank you very
Dr.
much.
Million, your parting shot.
I would love to say that, you know, I've been here close to 2 years in Uganda. The diversity in food is astounding. You know, you go to every part of Uganda, the food diversity is so high. I come from Ethiopia, and everybody knows the diversity we have. And I travel in most African countries. There's a lot of diversity there. We need to develop a policy which allows us to keep that diversity. And we have started a campaign which is called My Food is African. When we say My Food is African, it's not an empty promise or an empty slogan. It's based on the analysis of our food. It's based on reality or on our identity. So my parting shot is I'm calling for everyone to join this campaign and respect their own food, respect their own culture, and respect their land. Thank you.
Well, I want to thank you so much, Dr. Million and Joshua. Dr. Million comes from Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa, and Joshua is the program coordinator, that is Pelham Uganda. Thank you so much for your time, and of course, let's all join the campaign, My Food is African. Most of the times, we are moving away from our foods and adopting new natures. In Kampala here, when you talk about food, take the young generation, they'll talk about chips and chicken. I don't know where chips and chicken became one of our key foods. We are missing out the kalo, the matoke, and all that. So let's promote this. Have a lovely day. See you tomorrow, God willing, for God and my country. Good morning.